Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Governor.
Yeah, all right.
Have a great day.
You too. Yeah.
You know, people already have a hard time before Election Day making sure that they get full information, nonpartisan information on the issues, prepare themselves to vote. So on voting day, the last thing you want is for them to feel like they need to overcome all these challenges to submit their ballot, to make their voice heard.
Historically, voting systems have been designed around the regulatory requirements, what the law says about how to deliver elections, but no one had really stopped and looked at voting systems, the actual equipment, the ballot design, and everything around that from the perspective of the voter. What does the voter think? So VSAP flipped that on its edge and said, let's start with that.
For 35 years, voters in LA County used the Votomatic punch card system. In 2003, the stylus was replaced with felt-tip pens, and Ink-A-Vote was how we elected presidents and school boards and decided over 450 propositions. But with every election cycle, it became clear that voting technology had fallen out of step with voters' needs.
You know, in every election, you know something's going to happen, you just don't know what.
Charles Stewart is the co-director of the Caltech MIT Voting Technology Project and provided his expertise to Los Angeles County during the earliest stages of the VSAP initiative.
You have to be agile in this environment because there's new ways either to screw up or there's new ways for people to cast doubt on the outcome.
Research has shown that people care a great deal about elections. They are passionate about candidates and issues on the ballot. But at each step of the process, they are asking themselves, is it worth the effort? Deciding who and what to vote for is just the first hurdle. How and where to vote adds even more obstacles.
Where this started was a desire to create a voting experience, so something more than just technology and systems, but a voting experience that has the ability to measure up to the significance of voting, the fact that in the act of voting that we're doing something very individualized, but it has a cumulative impact.
You know, at the end of the day, we're all voters and we all face the same challenges: time, education, access. We all just want to be able to know where we can vote, have it be a place where we feel safe and we can get to relatively quick. And when we walk out, we feel like we trusted the process and we know that our vote has been cast.
The process to design a new voting system began with the Open Design Search. It cast a wide net and collected input from a broad range of experts, designers, and the general public.
So where do we stand today? This is our latest prototype. This is a more sophisticated prototype. It's not fully functional, but it is something that we can take out to voters, walk them through what that voting experience would look like.
He started by really getting to know the voters, the various interest groups, the people who had, ideas about what Los Angeles needed for voting, and then used that to develop a set of principles. I mean, he built this slowly and carefully in a way that so few projects have the luxury of doing, and so few project leaders have the patience to do.
Thanks for coming to vote today. There is a touch screen in front of you and a paper tray to the right. Your ballot is now loading.
The interesting thing about the project, of course, I don't live inside Dean's head, but I know at the beginning Dean was very interested in the user experience.
We literally had people in our first forum when we started this project who I would say were pretty active critics of our operation and critics of the systems that were previously used for voting. We wanted them at the table.
IDEO is a global design company based in the Silicon Valley. It was hired as a design partner to work with the Registrar's Office and the stakeholders' advisory committees to design the concept, look, and feel of this voting system, a modular system that could adapt over time.
Dean is taking a major risk, and the risk isn't like that he's doing something wild and dangerous. The risk is that he's doing something radical to improve a fundamental part of our democratic system. But no one else wants to do that, and especially a system as large as Los Angeles County.
Excuse me, do you have Ink-A-Vote?
If you think about designing for equity in voting, So you think about starting with the people who have been most underserved by the process.
Designing for the voter experience or the customer experience is actually bringing somebody in who has those needs and having them interact with the equipment and realizing that it doesn't matter if it's the right height, if it doesn't feel comfortable for that person, or if it doesn't give them the sense of privacy or the independence that it gives any other voters.
Our number one goal is a private and independent voting experience. Say, like when it says the thing about customize, right. I couldn't reach that selection.
As the voting rights advocate for Disability Rights California, Gabe Taylor brought a needed perspective to the VSAP project. He remembers an early brainstorming session at IDEO.
You know, people would be chiming in with the idea of like, you know, I would want greater sensitivity on the touch screen. I would want larger keys on the keypad. I would want, and as people would suggest different ideas, someone from the IDEO team would just be popping up Post-it notes. And it was the first time that I ever really felt like this was a project where everybody had a say in this design.
You not only have to think just about what the machine looks like, you have to think about whether it's going to fit in a warehouse. You're going to have to think about, you know, the tubs that you put the ballots in, that you have a chain of custody process to ensure that you can account for all this paper that's floating around the system. So just the logistics that voters almost never see.
The challenge of holding a successful election in LA County is colossal.
I think a lot of people don't realize the size and scope of Los Angeles County. So we have more registered voters in this single county than 42 of the states have statewide.
Yeah, Dean always likes to remind us, you know, if we were a state, we'd be the 7th largest state and all that. So, you know, it's a lot of people.
With a lot of different needs. And the ballot marking device, or BMD, would have to be adaptable, accessible, and secure.
So this was the looks like prototype, almost finished, and then this is the final design that we ultimately have as the design validation unit. So this actually matches the specifications that we will put into the documentation when we actually go out to find somebody to manufacture the devices.
A manufacturing contract was awarded to Smartmatic for 31,000 VSAP BMDs. At the same time, the voting environment was undergoing some dramatic changes, spurred in part by the landmark Voters' Choice Act, which the California legislature passed in 2016.
What was great about it is it really enabled us to take our vision and the work that we put together on VSAP and accelerate that into the development phase of our system, because then we had the regulatory framework that would allow us to deliver on that research and design that we had been working on for so long.
The election is just around the corner, and Los Angeles County has a new way for voters to make their voices heard. New Los Angeles County vote centers are located throughout the county. Cast your ballot near your home, work, or favorite park.
VSAP was designed to work within the Voters' Choice Act, which is something we've never seen before. Being able to design an entire administration towards how voting was going to be.
Hey, from the Carson Community Center, check this out. This is what the new voting machine is going to look like for 2020. They're having mock elections throughout the city and county of Los Angeles to give you a chance to learn how to do it. Now voting will come to you. You won't have to go to voting. It's a great system. It's going to revolutionize the way people have a chance to cast their ballot. I love being a part of this.
Casting their ballots for things like favorite LA selfie spot and favorite LA sports team, thousands participated in a mock election, setting the stage for a pilot in November 2019.
This technology is better, so it was a good experience.
My voting experience was awesome. I checked my ballot and there were no mistakes, and I printed it out, cast my vote.
Yes, I did check my ballot.
I did check my ballot before.
The system allowed me to check my ballot. I would make sure that I had everything correct.
New voting machines have to pass a gauntlet of tests mandated by the California Secretary of State before they are certified. Following the November municipal election, there were some hardware and software issues and security concerns that needed to be addressed.
And sure, there were issues and there were questions. And of course, the reason you do a pilot is to be a good dress rehearsal and get all those issues out. But no one left saying, what have they been doing for all those years? They left saying, wow, this is easy.
Still, with the March 2020 primary election right around the corner, the big question was, will Angelenos know what to do and where to go?
The great thing was that there were a lot of people that came out to vote. Voter turnout is always important, but we need to ensure that our systems are capable of efficiently processing those voters and making them feel like they have a great experience, but that they can trust that their vote will count and be counted.
There was a major problem on Tuesday, Super Tuesday, with long lines and waits at polling stations throughout Los Angeles County, the largest voting jurisdiction in the nation.
Obviously not the rollout that we had hoped for, but I think it's also important to point out that the majority of the issues that we dealt with today on the technical end related to the check-in process.
Dean Logan, the LA County Registrar, you can almost see that he feels the weight of 4.3 million registered voters in LA County on his shoulders.
The whole narrative that VSAP was a voting system for the future was overshadowed in the days that followed by calls for a review into what went wrong.
Anytime you take a project like this, something that hasn't been done before, you run the risk of putting yourself out there, and you have to be willing to take those bumps and to risk failure in order to finally get to success. And I think when I look back at March 2020, I think there were a number of things that we learned in that process, a number of things that we could have done better. But the fundamental idea of VSAP, the equipment, the model, it was sound.
What people are left with is an experience, their memory of experiences is the last thing that happens. So if they don't get through that polling place smoothly, what they remember was this election didn't go well.
Logan promised his office would be heads down to correct the problems from the primary. But no one could have predicted the months of tumult that would follow.
Who could have imagined that a decade-long project and then the experience that we went through in March would lead to even more unexpected challenges?
A once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. Streets nationwide filled with demonstrators. Record-shattering weather and climate disasters, disinformation campaigns and conspiracy theories flooding our media feeds.
The 2020 election was challenged by people who wanted to make really outrageous, unfounded criticisms against the system. In that process, the fact-based part of the election infrastructure held.
Each new challenge added a layer of complexity that forced the county's election officials to pivot and adapt seemingly overnight.
They've also come up with this safe presidential election plan, which includes placing machines at least 6 feet apart and sanitizing the touch screens after each use.
Logan acknowledges there is work to be done to convince voters that the system is secure, especially with polls showing many fear their ballot won't be counted accurately.
This should make casting a ballot in person a lot easier, allowing voters more leeway in deciding when to vote. On top of that, any registered voter can cast a ballot at any vote center.
The fact that you were able to see such great venues across the city, and just the fact that you can now think back and think, whoa, I saw the Dodgers there and I voted there. I think it brought an extra kind of cherry on top to the whole process that was so great and, is the fabric of Los Angeles.
I think what's great about that and what I'm particularly proud about for our organization is that the VSAP model, the agility that was built into the VSAP model was to recognize that we don't always know what we're going to face, and we need to be able to deliver despite those challenges.
Thank you very much. Stick your time.
Oh yeah, please.
That's the best part, right?
That's right, thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks for volunteering.
Absolutely.
There's a joke in the election community which is that one day we'll run a perfect election and no one will notice. I think we went from very rocky primaries across the country to really beautifully run elections.
There was this very cool moment because I was able to vote on something that I helped bring about. I went to vote and my daughter was sitting behind me, and my wife said, you know, Papa helped design this. And that was this really cool moment.
I'm an avid voter, and I am one of those people that enjoys the voting experience. I vote with my mom. My mom speaks Spanish, votes on the Spanish language ballot. I didn't have to help her for the first time, and she walked away like pretty much over the moon. The fact that she was able to do it on her own. So that was great. It made this whole process worth it.
It's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people.
In the weeks and months that followed, baseless claims of voting fraud and direct attacks on our democratic institutions forced officials to defend the integrity of the election, a task made easier in part due to the successful implementation of the VSAT model.
The integrity of the election rests on, as I like to say, good election laws expertly implemented. The placement of polling places was carefully thought out. Things like what data get reported to the public was carefully thought out. I do think LA County is a model for innovation in voting technology, absolutely.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right? And so you guys all pulled together and you were able to pull off an amazing event. You know, you're the light on the hill for everyone across the nation to look at how well we've pulled off our election.
The real lesson of this project is that this work is never done. We have to continue to pay attention, to listen, and to break down the barriers that hold people back from voting, and address the security concerns and address the accessibility concerns. We made big steps in doing that with the VSAT project, but that work is ongoing and will continue going forward.